You all for being here today. We'll go ahead and move through our topic, and then at the end, we'll have time for questions in the chat. But as I mentioned, just a chance to talk about different ways to get involved on campus, what that means for your career development, and how you can showcase that story for employers. Um, Before we dive into all of that, just a quick little introduction to our team here. So we have a team of seven. The faces here on the screen are our more student-facing side of the team. So if you book an appointment with us and navigate or maybe come to one of our events, it's likely that you'll be engaging with one of the folks here on the screen. Hannah's our assistant director. We have four career advisors, including myself. And we are here to help you with that full spectrum of career development during your time in college. So maybe you're a freshman, you're looking for help building out your resume, or maybe you're a senior and you're already thinking about negotiating offers and getting that first job. We are here to support you throughout that whole process. And at the end, we'll have a way that you can book an appointment with us as well. So, quick little roadmap of where we're headed today. We're going to spend a few minutes talking about first, just different ways that you can get involved outside of your classes, and thinking about ways that you can do that in an intentional, strategic way. Secondly, we're going to explore a couple stories from alumni who have done this really successfully. We're going to talk about once you're in those experiences, how do you get the most out of them? And then finally, we'll touch on telling the story of that involvement to employers when it comes time to interview or things like that. So, first of all, talking about just getting involved, where to get started. There are so many different opportunities to get involved outside of your classes. Clubs, organizations, events are a big one. And I know these QR codes are kind of small, but this first one will take you to Gobbler Connect, which is the platform that houses pretty much all of these opportunities. At Virginia Tech, there are over 800 different clubs and organizations. Some of those are major related, some of them are just for fun. But regardless, I can assure you there is something that you will be interested in. So definitely make sure to check those out. On-campus employment is another one we often see students getting involved in. There are part-time positions across campus. Some of these are things like working in the dining hall or at the gym. Departments often hire part-time student employees to help with routine tasks in their space. And there are even internships that you can get on campus. So sometimes these roles will have a little bit of elevated responsibility, a little bit more intentional career development, and that is through the Campus Intern EXP program. Within Pamplin, we even have a great student employment opportunity, and that's the Engage TA program. That's actually open for applications right now. So if there is a class you've really resonated with, if you would be interested in being a TA for that, that is a great opportunity to gain a little bit of experience, work closely with a faculty member, and hold a leadership role with your peers. Study abroad, another great way that students often gain experience outside of the classroom. Lots of different opportunities here, and one that I'll quickly plug, our team is actually leading a trip to Portugal over spring break. So short-term opportunity, but a great way to enhance some of your career skills and interact with another culture. There's also opportunities to study abroad for as long as a semester. So definitely make sure to check out those opportunities if you think you would be interested in those. And then finally, student research. This one is maybe a little bit less common for Pamplin students, but we still see this a lot on different resumes. Whether you are working with a team of other students on a research project or working with a faculty member on their own research, this is a great opportunity, especially if you are interested in pursuing further education in the future or interested in a research-based role in industry. This is not an exhaustive list. These are just some of the more common ways that we see students getting involved and getting experience on campus. So I would definitely encourage you to check these out. So lots of different opportunities. We've established this, but how do you pick which ones to get involved in? Which ones are going to be the most relevant for you? And I have a couple questions I want to share with you that I think are helpful in kind of determining which things to say yes to. We all have limited time, limited capacity, and so you want to make sure that the things you're saying yes to are going to be most valuable for you and your development. So, first question is realistically, what can I invest in my on-campus involvement this semester? Oftentimes, this comes down to simply time. Maybe you took 18 credits this semester and didn't have the ability to get super involved, but you know you'll only be taking 12 or 15 in the spring. That's a great time to start thinking about, okay, what aligns with my goals and how might I be able to take that extra time and put it towards something that will benefit me professionally. So, first thing, realistically, what can I invest in my on-campus involvement this semester? Second question I want to challenge you with is what do I want to gain from my involvement on campus? Okay, so what do I want to gain? What am I hoping to get out of that experience? This looks different for everyone. For a lot of students, maybe you're just looking to make friends and find your community on campus. That is an excellent goal for getting involved. And I think you can probably attain that with any number of different opportunities on campus. For other students, maybe it's a technical skill. Maybe you're a finance major, but you want to learn coding. Maybe a student org or something where you're getting a little bit of hands-on experience could be a great opportunity to supplement what you're already learning in class. And then finally, something else I think students often want to gain from their involvement on campus is something that's a little harder to define. You may have heard of these referred to as power skills or soft skills, but they're things like leadership, communication, those things that are not technical skills, but they're so, so important for entering the workforce. And I have some of these up here on the screen. This is a list of the 8 NACE career readiness competencies. It's a big fancy name, but NACE simply stands for the National Association of Colleges and Employers. This is an organization that brings together career services folks like myself with employers to talk about how we can best support you as you are progressing through college and gaining experience. So NACE took this list of the 8 competencies that employers are most wanting to see from college graduates. They kind of honed and refined this down to these 8 different skill sets. This is not an exhaustive list. There are things like time management and attention to detail that you could argue maybe fall into one of these buckets. But this is kind of a broad listing of things that employers are wanting to see from you to know that you are prepared for your first job. Things like leadership, technology, we're pretty familiar with those, but there's others that are a little harder to define here. So I want to talk about professionalism quickly. We may all have different ideas of what this means. I like to think of it as simply good manners in the workplace. That may look different in different contexts, but the way that you are treating others, the way that you are carrying yourself, all of that comes back to professionalism. And it's so important for the way that you show up in the workplace. So, how does this relate to getting involved on campus? Well, again, this comes back to that question of what are you hoping to gain out of your involvement on campus? Maybe, again, you're that finance student that wants to learn coding. Well, technology in that case is going to be an important competency for you to be thinking about. Maybe you're in a consulting club on campus and you're working with real world clients. That's a great opportunity to leverage that professionalism, maybe build some communication skills as you're thinking about problems and helping clients solve those. So I would encourage you, think about this list, maybe identify one of these competencies that you feel like is something you would like to work on, and then use that as a goal when you're identifying what opportunities to say yes to. So moving forward, I would love to hear a few of your thoughts. If there is an experience that you have been involved in and you found it really beneficial, I would love for you to just drop that in the chat quickly, and as well as the reason that you found it beneficial. So maybe one thing you've been involved in and why did you find it helpful? We'll give it just a few minutes here, see if anyone has any thoughts. Oh, so one is DABS. That's the Dean's Advisory Board of Students within Pamplin, for anyone who's not familiar, because it prepares you for collaboration and service. Absolutely. I love that answer. And collaboration, maybe going back to that teamwork NACE competency. That's a great one. Alrighty. Well, we will keep rolling along here. And if anyone does have any ideas of things that come to mind that have been helpful for you, I would love to hear those. And I know your fellow students would as well. So we've talked about thinking about getting involved just to start with. Now I want to explore a couple stories of alumni who have done this really successfully during their time at Virginia Tech. Let's see here. So the first alum that I want to introduce you to is Madeline. Madeline graduated just a few months ago in May 2025. She was an accounting major. She had the opportunity to do some great internships during her time in Pamplin and is now going on to hold a very successful accounting role in that industry. During her time here, as you can see, Madeline got heavily involved, especially freshman year. She joined several major related clubs. She was interested in sports business, so she added that to the list. Campus intramurals, collegiate women in business, and the list goes on. So lots of different opportunities represented here, from clubs and organizations to on-campus employment to studying abroad. And quick shout out to DABS. We have that listed here for Madeline as well. As you can see, there were lots of things she got involved in freshman year, but not everything was something she carried through to senior year because not all of those experiences were quite as valuable to her, depending on those goals that she had set for herself, maybe depending on time capacity as well. However, collegiate women in business was something that she really did connect with. She loved the networking opportunities. She was able to hold multiple leadership roles in that organization. And that ultimately led to her having networking opportunities with employers where she landed an internship and eventually made connections that led her to her first job post grad. I asked for Madeline's permission to mock up just a sample of what her resume may have looked like by the time she graduated. And this is really small print, so I apologize. You can see not everything is listed on Madeline's resume. Again, going back to that story that she wanted to tell, only key experiences here. So, first of all, in that education section, we have her study abroad semester listed. Moving down to the experience section, we have her TA position with a couple really key outcomes from that experience. Her activities section has those three different leadership roles that she held in collegiate women in business. Again, highlighting the impact that she was able to have in those roles with some key metrics. Um, so again, thinking about the story that you want to tell, thinking about the impact that you want to have as you're getting involved on campus, resumes are such a great way to tell that story. When I asked Madeline what advice she had to share, she said, and I think thinking with freshmen in mind, but I think this is applicable to anyone, she said, go to Gobbler Fest to explore and see all the different clubs and organizations. By sophomore year, you want to be honing in on a few to invest your time in. Again, going back to that idea of what do you have capacity to say yes to? Pursue leadership positions within an organization to show recruiters that you're a team player. You're willing to take initiative and responsibility. And as you may have seen from her resume, Madeline absolutely did that. She had some great impact to show. And ultimately, those experiences were ones that made her very successful professionally. Moving on to one other alum I want to introduce you to. This is Laura. Laura also graduated a few months ago in May. She was a first generation student who triple majored in two different BIT majors, BIT DSS as well as cybersecurity. And that third major was management consulting and analytics. So if she wasn't busy enough with all three of those majors, you can also see a list of some of the other opportunities she got involved with on campus. So, living learning community, a professional organization, a business fraternity, jobs on campus, study abroad, and the list goes on. Similar to Madeline, not all of these experiences were ones Laura carried through to her senior year. However, Alpha was one that she got involved with freshman year, found it really beneficial, as well as Delta Sigma Pi. She was able to hold leadership roles here as she progressed in those clubs. She also had great networking opportunities and was able to also land internships and finally her current full-time job through these experiences. Now, we had a sample of what Madeline's resume might have looked like. This is Laura's actual resume that she was willing to share with you all today. Again, the print is really small, so I apologize, but I will just highlight a few things here. Similar to Madeline, we have that study abroad experience listed in that education section, showcasing the program, the time frame, and the location. Moving down to leadership experience is where we hone in on some of those student clubs and organizations. And again, great leadership roles here, a lot of impact to showcase. I want to rewind for a second to when we were talking about the NACE competencies, because I think there's a lot we can pull out here. If we look at Laura's leadership experience section, we can see a couple of those roles that she held within Alpha. So secretary, progressing on to VP. We see that she had elevated responsibility, had a lot of great impact to show. But if we think about those NACE competencies, that list at the bottom of the screen here, how do you see those coming through in the way that Laura is telling her story? Any ideas of some competencies that she's showcasing here? And if you have any ideas, please feel free to drop those in the chat here. Ooh, teamwork? Absolutely. That comes through in a lot of places. So that secretary role, communicating between executive board and general members, directing that executive board, teamwork would be such an important competency to be showcasing in that scenario. So yes, that's a great one. All right. Well, here were a few that I saw come through and the way that Laura described her experience. There's no one right answer here, just a few thoughts. We can see again that teamwork piece coming through and how she was working with others in that organization, career and self-development, and the fact that she progressed in her leadership abilities throughout that time. She sought out new experiences to challenge herself. Equity and inclusion, working with a diverse group here, some critical thinking, communication, professionalism. Really, I think we've hit all the NACE competencies here in different ways that Laura is describing her experience. So thinking past just what she was doing and really getting at the impact here. This is a great way to be thinking about how you can showcase what you've done for your resume. When I asked Laura what advice she had for you today, this is what she had to say. Use your close proximity to campus to attend as many events as possible. Remain socially active on top of those academic responsibilities. Laura also strongly believes that there's a fit for every single Pamplin student in some kind of extracurricular activity. And if you feel like there's not, you can always create a club. It's just being involved and active that's really the biggest thing there. As I mentioned, Laura had the opportunity to land a great internship through her club involvement and networking. She is now going on to work at a very successful company. So we wish her all the best and really appreciate her insight here. So for our purposes, though, I want to hit the fast forward button with you for a moment. So let's think to maybe next semester. You found some great opportunities to get involved with, but you're really thinking about how to get the most out of that experience. How do you maximize that? And I want to spend just a few minutes thinking through a couple practical tips that can help you do that. First thing is a professional journal. I don't know about y'all, but I am terrible at keeping a journal. It's always something I have on my New Year's resolution list and I never get to it. But my professional journal is something that I'm actually really good at keeping up with. I have this in a Word document. It's organized by month. And at the end of the month, I go through and I meticulously document everything that I accomplished that month. So for me, that looks like how many students did I meet with? How many events was I involved with? Did I give a class presentation? Did I learn a new skill? Did I meet new people? I document all of those things. And for you, maybe that's a class project. Maybe it's something you worked on in your on-campus job. Maybe it's applying for that study abroad experience. But the reason why this is important is because as you continue to progress through your time in Pamplin, as you continue to gain these experiences, you're not going to remember the ins and outs of everything that you've done. It is so hard looking back on an experience from several years ago and trying to pull out those key details and metrics that you may want to showcase on your resume, but you no longer have access to. So, this is why a professional journal is really important. This can be kept in any way that you want. It can be messy. It doesn't have to be super refined. But I would encourage you, think about having a place where you store all of these details for future reference. Talk about how many teammates you worked on that project with. Think about a technical skill or maybe even one of those NACE competencies that you've been working on. Document people that you met for the first time. Maybe you want to connect with them on LinkedIn. Think about metrics if you made progress towards a project. All of those things can go in your professional journal and be updated regularly. Now, as I said, this is super important because when it comes time to updating your resume, you have all of those details at your fingertips ready to go. Oftentimes, something we see with student resumes is that bullet points on that resume are really vague. They don't fully showcase the impact that you've had. So, for example, maybe you have a resume bullet point like this: helped organize events. That sounds like amazing experience. But unless you tell me the details of that, I won't fully understand the impact that you had, and an employer won't either. So, with your professional journal, though, you can keep track of those details of specifically what that impact was, and you can turn helped organize events into something more like this. Collaborated with 2 campus departments to organize 7 sorority events with up to 55 attendees each. Now I start seeing the impacts that you've had. I understand that you had to bring in those NACE competencies of teamwork. You had to bring in some organizational skills to pull off this event, and I understand what your role was. Maybe it's something like assisted with social media management. Again, unless you tell that story in a little bit more depth, that employer is not going to understand what that meant for you. But with that professional journal, keeping the track of those details, you can turn that into created social media reels and graphics for VT's American Marketing Association chapter using Canva, resulting in a 150% increase in Instagram followers over 6 months. Again, we're thinking about that technology piece, bringing in a couple technical skills, but we're showing impact with those metrics. That 150% increase in Instagram followers, you would not have been able to document that unless you were keeping track. So, this is really where a professional journal shines and is so helpful long term. Okay, so going back to our idea of maximizing that impact, we want to think about a professional journal, but we also want to think about your network. And I know this is a little bit of a tricky topic sometimes. It can feel a little bit icky to people, but I want to encourage you, believe it or not, you already have a network. That network consists of maybe the other folks on this career chat today. Maybe that's people in your classes, your peers, your professors, your supervisors, maybe even your roommate's parent that works in a cool industry. Those people are already part of your network. However, it's up to you to maximize those relationships. So, LinkedIn is a great place to start. If you are meeting people through clubs, maybe sports events, study abroad experiences, make sure you're connecting with those people on LinkedIn. And then take it a step further. Nurture that relationship by asking for a coffee chat, maybe 10 or 15 minutes of their time over Zoom to ask about their experience, to learn a little bit more about their industry. You could message them on LinkedIn with maybe a thoughtful question about something they posted, and then you can engage with their LinkedIn content. Like it, comment, ask a question, but maintain that visibility in their network. Again, networking, you can go out, you can get all these new connections. That's amazing. But I want to encourage you to think about the people that you already know and how you're leveraging those relationships as well. So, a couple ideas for maximizing your involvement once you're already involved in something, and that is professional journal and networking with the people that you're already coming in contact with. Final thing I want to touch on is telling that story. So, Once you've gotten involved, how do you communicate that story for the sake of an employer or in a job interview, something like that? Well, I'll touch on LinkedIn again, because again, having those connections is really important, but how you are showing up in those relationships, maintaining your visibility is even more important. If you're someone like me and you don't really like posting on social media, you can repost articles, insights, events, things that you come across that resonate with you. That's adding value to that LinkedIn feed for all the people that you're connected with. You can maybe include a question about an article you read, ask for your network's thoughts. Um, or if you're feeling a little bit braver, you can go back to that professional journal and post about things that you've been accomplishing. Maybe you attended a great event with one of the clubs you're a part of. You can post about that. You can tag the people that organized that event and give them a shout out. That's a great way to kind of boost their visibility as well and kind of spread the love there. You could talk about a project you completed. Shout out your teammates. Maybe you're studying for a certification. That's another great thing to post about to show kind of your initiative and the fact that you're working to get ahead in that industry. Maybe a positive outcome from a student work, something you're really proud of. But the more that you can share that story, have that professional footprint, the more value that you're adding to that network that you already have. So would definitely encourage you, think about some things that you're working on currently that you want to be documenting, that maybe you want to post about at the end of the semester. And these are all great things to be doing. And then second idea for telling your story is in your interviews. A lot of times prepping is hard because we're not sure what we're going to be asked in that interview setting. But the things that you're doing right now through your clubs, your on-campus job, maybe your study abroad experiences, those are all great examples to be preparing to talk about in an interview. One of our favorite tips for students is instead of thinking about the specific questions that you're going to be asked in that interview, focus instead on the top relevant attributes, skills, or values you want your interviewer to take away about you, and then have a story ready to tell for each one. Maybe you're an RA right now and you've gotten really good at conflict resolution. Be ready to tell a story about that. Maybe there was a time when two roommates were fighting and you were able to step in and help them see each other's perspectives. That's a great story to have prepared to tell. Maybe you want to talk about building trust with clients if you're interviewing for a really client-facing role. Again, something you've done on campus could be a great way to highlight that skill. We won't go through all the examples here, but feel free to take a picture if this is something that resonates with you. But I would most of all encourage you, be preparing to tell those stories in STAR method. And if you're not sure what that is, please come talk to us. We're happy to work through some interview prep with you. But I want to encourage you, these experiences that you're getting right now are so important and can be used in so many different ways. Don't discredit them because they're not an internship or they're not formal work experience. Instead, be thinking about the skills that you are gaining and be articulating those through how you're showing up on LinkedIn or how you're preparing for these interviews. These are such important preparational experiences for your own career development. So, a couple of questions I'll leave you with. First thing is, what are you investing your time and resources in, and why? Is that meeting the goals that you have for your professional development? And then, second question is, how can you best maximize and tell the story of those experiences? Maybe that's on LinkedIn, maybe that's in a different way, but we are here to support you in that journey and happy to kind of help you think through how you might be able to showcase that. This is all that I have for today, so I'll bring it around to our last slide here. Please feel free to reach out to myself or the rest of our team if there's anything I can help with. And Abby just put that link in the chat. If you did not sign in, please make sure to do that so we know you were here. But I think we have some time for questions. So please feel free to drop those in the chat if anything came up during our conversation today. And thank you all for being here. I'll hang on a second and see if we get any questions come through. Ooh, so we have one. What kinds of questions should you ask alum of student orgs to network? That's a great question. If there are alumni coming into your student orgs, or maybe people who were in that student org and have now graduated, you can reach out to them, maybe over LinkedIn or if you meet them in person, and you can ask things like, what was the most valuable experience that you had when you were a part of Pamplin or a part of this club? You could ask, what advice would you have for someone in my shoes today? How can I be preparing myself for the kind of career that you have? Um, is there anything that you wish that you had done differently during your career development? Those are all great questions to be asking. Oh, we have another one coming in. How do I go about getting a referral for a company? That's a great question, one that we get a lot. Um, and referrals, I would say if you are in the process of trying to get a referral for a company, maybe don't have that as the goal that you lead with. Instead, think about how are you going to build a relationship with someone who potentially in the future could give you a referral. But instead, you want to focus on the relationship. So, how can you learn about their career path? How can you ask thoughtful questions and engage with them? Maybe you can share something of value. And then over time, as that relationship develops, and things are looking good, maybe you can let them know that you're really interested in their company and see if they offer that referral. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But I would encourage you prioritize that relationship. That's going to be the most important thing, and a referral may come as a result of that. One other question that came in about sharing slides. We will have this recorded and posted on YouTube in the next couple days. So make sure to search for us on YouTube. I think it's just Pamplin Career Services, and you'll be able to access it that way. All right. Well, I am going to go ahead and stop screen sharing. Thank you all for being here today. If anything comes up, please feel free to reach out, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.